Japan. Japan consists of islands that lie along the Pacific Rim, east of China, and across the Sea of Japan from the Korean Peninsula. Most of the archipelago, which has more than 3,000 islands, is just north of 30 degrees latitude. 4 islands make up most of the country. The physical area of all of Japan's islands is equivalent to about the size of the U.S. state of Montana. The islands have tall mountains originating from volcanic activity, as Japan is located in the Ring of Fire. About 108 of the volcanoes are active, including the famous Mount Fuji. About 73% of Japan is forested, mountainous, and is unsuitable for agricultural or industrial use. As a result, habitable zones, mainly located in the coastal regions, have extremely high population densities. Japan is one of the most densely populated countries in the world. Cities like Mexico City, Sao Paulo, and Bombay, which have vast slum communities, each claims to be the world's largest city, but lacks firm census data to verify its population. The largest metropolitan urban area in the world that can be verified is Tokyo, with a population of 26.7 million people. The Tokyo metropolitan area is located in an extensive agricultural region called the Kanto Plain and includes the conurbation of Tokyo, Yokohama, and Kawasaki. The second largest urban area in Japan is called the Kansai district and includes the cities of Kobe, Osaka, and Kyoto. Most of the population, about 67%, lives in urban areas such as Japan's core area, an urbanized region from Tokyo to Nagasaki. The 2020 population of Japan was listed at about 126 million, less than half the size of the United States. It is ironic that the world's largest metropolitan area is built on one of the worst places imaginable to build a city. Tokyo is located where 3 tectonic plates meet: the Eurasian Plate, the Philippine Plate, and the Pacific Plate. Earthquakes result when these plates shift, leading to possibly extensive damage and destruction. In 1923, a large earthquake struck the Tokyo area and killed an estimated 143,000 people. In 1995, an earthquake near Kobe killed about 5,500 people and injured another 26,000. In March 2011, a magnitude 9.0 earthquake struck 43 miles off the eastern coast of northern Japan. The earthquake itself caused extensive damage to the island of Honshu. A shockwave after the earthquake created a tsunami more than 130 feet high that crashed into the eastern coast of Japan, causing enormous damage to infrastructure and loss of life. Hundreds of aftershocks were recorded. At least 3 registered over 7.0 in magnitude. This is the strongest earthquake ever to hit Japan in recorded history. It resulted in more than 15,500 deaths and wreaked serious damage across Japan in the value of billions of dollars. Thousands of additional people remain missing. Nuclear power plants along the coast were hit hard by the tsunami, which knocked out their cooling systems and resulted in the meltdown of at least 3 reactors. The nuclear meltdowns created explosions that released a sizable quantity of nuclear material into the atmosphere. This is considered the worst nuclear accident since the 1986 reactor meltdown in the Soviet plant at Chernobyl, located north of Kiev in present-day Ukraine. The next big earthquake could happen at any time, since Japan is located in an active tectonic plate zone. Japan has 9 forest ecoregions that reflect the climate and geography of the islands. Japan is generally a rainy country with high humidity and a variety of climates. There is a latitude range of the inhabited islands from 24 degrees to 46 degrees north, which is comparable to the range between Nova Scotia and the Bahamas on the east coast of North America. There is a marked rainy season, beginning in early June and continuing for about a month, followed by hot, sticky weather. 5 or 6 typhoons pass over or near Japan every year, from early August to early October, sometimes resulting in significant damage. Japan has over 90,000 species of wildlife. The country of Japan is an interesting study in isolation geography and economic development. For centuries, shogun lords and samurai warriors ruled Japan, and Japan's society was highly organized and structured. Urban centers were well planned, and skilled artisans developed methods of creating high-grade metal products. While agriculture was always important, Japan always existed as a semi-urban community because the mountainous terrain forced most of the population to live along the country's coasts. Without a large rural population to begin with, Japan never really experienced the rural to urban shift common in the rest of the world. Coastal fishing, always a prominent economic activity, remains so today. The capital city was formerly called Edo and was a major city even before the Meiji period, from 1868 to 1912, when it was renamed Tokyo. Japan developed its own unique type of urbanized cultural heritage. In 1639, the shogunate enacted an isolationist closed country policy that spanned 2.5 centuries, known as the Edo period. In 1854, Commodore Matthew Perry and the Black Ships of the United States forced the opening of Japan. My computer did something funny. Forced the opening of Japan to the outside world. Let's see. Heart of a Samurai. In 1841, a Japanese fishing vessel sinks. Its crew is forced to swim to a small, unknown island where they are rescued by a passing American ship. Japan's borders remain closed to all Western nations, so the crew sets off to America, learning English along the way. This is a book summary, so if you guys are interested in some books, take a look at your reading. Encounters with the European colonial ships prompted Japan to industrialize. For the most part, the Japanese kept the Europeans out and only traded with select ships that were allowed to approach the shores. The fact that European ships were there at all was enough to convince the Japanese to evaluate their position in the world. During the colonial era, Britain was the most avid colonizer, with the largest and best equipped navy on the high seas. Britain colonized parts of the Americas, the Middle East, Africa, South Asia, and Australia, and was advancing into East Asia when they encountered the Japanese. Both Japan and Great Britain are island countries. Japan reasoned that if Great Britain could become so powerful, they should have the potential to become powerful too. Japan encompassed a number of islands and had more land area than Britain, but Japan did not have the coal and iron reserves that Britain had. Around 1868, a group of reformers worked to bring about a change in direction for Japan. Named after the emperor, the movement was called the Meiji Restoration. I might be pronouncing that wrong. M-E-I-J-I. Meiji? The return of the enlightened rule is what it means. Japanese modernizers studied the British pattern of development. The Japanese reformers were advised by the British about how to organize their industries and how to lay out transportation and delivery systems. Today, the British influence in Japan is easily seen in that both Japanese and British drivers drive on the left side of the road. The modernizers realized that to compete on the high seas in the world community, they had to move beyond samurai swords and wooden ships. Iron ore and coal would have to become the goods to fuel their own industrial revolution. Labor and resources were valuable elements of the early industrialization in all areas of the world, including Asia. Japan began to industrialize and build its economic and military power by first utilizing the few resources found in Japan. Since it was already semi-urban and had an organized social order with skilled artisan traditions, the road to industrialization moved quickly. Japan needed raw materials and expanded to take over the island of Formosa, which is Taiwan, and the Korean peninsula in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Japan was on its way to becoming a colonial power in its own right. They expanded to take control of the southern part of the Sakhalin Islands from Russia and part of Manchuria, or northeast China, from the Chinese. Japanese industries grew quickly as they put the local people they subjugated to work and extracted the raw materials they needed from their newly taken colonies. The three-way split in China revealed that the Japanese colonizers were a major force in China, even after other European powers had halted their colonial activities. Japan's relative location as an independent island country provided both quick access to their neighbors and also protection from them. By World War II, Japan's economic and military power had expanded until they were dominating Asia's Pacific Rim community. The Japanese military believed that they could invade the western coast of North America and eventually take control of the entire United States. Their attack on Pearl Harbor, Hawaii in 1941 was meant to be only a beginning. History has recorded the outcome. The United States rallied its people and resources to fight against the Japanese in World War II. The Soviet Union also turned to fight the Japanese Empire. The end came after the atomic bombs, one each, were dropped by the United States on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The terms of Japan's surrender in 1945 stipulated that Japan had to give up claims on the Russian islands, Korea, Taiwan, China, and all other places they had previously controlled. Japan also lost the Kuril Islands off its northern shores to the Soviet Union. The islands have never been returned. Japan offered Russia an enormous amount of cash for them, but the matter remains unresolved. The Kuril Island chain continues to be controlled by Russia. Japan also agreed not to have a military for offensive purposes. Japan was decimated during World War I. Its infrastructure and economy were destroyed. Since 1945, Japan has risen to become Asia's economic superpower and the economic center of one of the three core areas of the world. Japanese manufacturing has set a standard for global production. For example, think of all the automobiles that are Japanese products: Toyota, Honda, Mitsubishi, Subaru, Nissan, Isuzu, Mazda, and Suzuki. How many Russian, Brazilian, Chinese, or Indonesian autos are sold in the United States? The term economic tiger is used in Asia to indicate an entity with an aggressive and fast-growing economy. Japan has surpassed the benchmark and is called the economic dragon of Asia. The four economic tigers competing with Japan are Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and South Korea. Japan came back from total devastation in 1945 to become a world economic superpower. During this economic development, the nation developed a work ethic where companies emphasized the success of the company of a whole to be more important than any single individual. Let me rephrase that. They emphasized the success of the company as a whole as more important than any single individual. This work culture continues to this day. Japan's recovery in the last half of the century was remarkable. If an island nation like Japan could accomplish this rapid growth in its economy, why couldn't other similar-sized countries accomplish the same level of growth? What was it that caused the Japanese people to not only recover so quickly, but to rise above the world's standard, to excel in their economic endeavors? The answer could be related to the fact that Japan already had an industrialized and urbanized society before the war. The United States did help rebuild some of Japan's infrastructure that had been destroyed during World War II. Things like ports and transportation systems to help bring aid and provide for humanitarian support. However, the Japanese people were able to not only recover from the devastation of World War II, but to rise to the level of an economic superpower to compete with the United States. Japan used internal organization and strong centripetal dynamics to create a highly functional and cohesive society that focused its drive and fortitude on creating a manufacturing sector that catapulted the country's economy from devastation to financial success. The same dynamics can be applied to Germany after World War II. Germany was completely destroyed by the war. The Allied powers decimated Germany's infrastructure and resources. Today, Germany is the strongest economy in all of Europe. Part of the reason Germany came back so strong economically was its industrialized and urbanized society. Germany also was able to access resources. Again, think of all the automobiles that Germany produced. Mercedes, Volkswagen, Porsche, BMW, and Audi. The pattern of economic growth was similar for Japan and Germany. The loss of colonies after World War II prompted Japan to look elsewhere for its raw materials. Extensive networks of trade were developed to provide the necessary materials for the rapidly growing manufacturing sector. The urbanized region around Tokyo includes the cities of Yokohama and Kawasaki, swelled to accommodate the growth of industry. Japan's coastal interior has a large number of cities and urban areas that rapidly increased with the growing manufacturing sector. Modern Japan. Japan is a homogeneous society. In 2010, all but 1% of the population was ethnically Japanese. Japan resembles a nation-state where people of a common heritage and aspiration hold to a unified government. This provides a strong centripetal force that unites the people under one culture and one language. However, religious allegiances in Japan vary. There are a good number of people who indicate non-religious ideologies. Shintoism and Buddhism are the main religious traditions. Shintoism includes a veneration of ancestors and divine forces of nature. There is no one single written text for Shintoism. The religion is a loosely knit set of concepts based on morality, attitude, sensibility, and right practice. It is possible for a Shinto priest to conduct a wedding for a couple, whereas the funeral, hopefully taking place much later, for either of the spouses may be conducted by a Buddhist priest. The Buddhism that is practiced in Japan is more meditative in nature than mystical. The code of etiquette in Japan governs the expectations of social behavior. Hon and tamate contrasts a person's true feelings and desires from the behavior and opinions one displays in public. To simplify it, hon is what you think, and tatame is what you say or do. In many cases, it can lead to outright telling of lies in order to avoid exposing true inward feelings. In Japanese culture, public failure and the disapproval of others are seen as particular sources of shame and reduced social standing. So it's very common to avoid direct confrontation or disagreement in most social contexts. Wa is a Japanese cultural concept that implies a peaceful unity and conformity within a social group, in which members prefer the continuation of a harmonious community over their own personal interest. Modernization has brought new opportunities and problems for the Japanese people. With a highly urban and industrialized society, personal income in Japan is high, and family size is quite low, at about 1.2 children. The replacement level for a given population is about 2.1 children. This means that Japan has a declining population. The population is aging, and there are not enough young people to take entry-level jobs. The family has been at the center of Japanese tradition, and the elderly have been venerated and honored. As the country has become more economically developed, higher incomes for young people have prompted a shift toward convenience and consumer amenities. Consumer goods are available, but all the oil and about 60% of the food products have to be imported. During the off-season, fruit, for example, is expensive. Beef is at a premium price, so fish is a staple source of protein. Income levels are high, but the cost of living in places like Tokyo is quite high also. Japan is a constitutional monarchy and a sovereign state where the emperor is a ceremonial figurehead. Executive power is wielded chiefly by the prime minister, who is appointed by the emperor after being designated by the Diet, Japanese legislature, and his cabinet. Japan is facing a labor shortage for many low-level service jobs that had traditionally been held by young people entering the workforce. It is an island country that has prided itself for being 99% Japanese. Countries in stage 5 of the Index of Economic Development usually enter a negative population growth pattern. According to population statistics, Japan is at the start of a serious population decline with a negative population growth pattern, while Western Europe and the United States also have a declining percentage of young people. In those countries, the declining youth cohort has been replaced by an elevated level of immigration, both legal and illegal. Culturally, this is not an attractive option for Japan, but they are forced to address the labor shortage in any way they can. Their economy will depend on the ability to acquire cheap labor and resources to compete in the global marketplace.